You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Learning Leader Spotlight, where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your guest host, Lori Fancher, and I'm a relationship manager with Training Pros. Training Pros is a contract staffing company in the L&D field, and we like to say here at Training Pros, if you have too many projects and not enough people, let us help you find the best consultants for your project so you can start it with confidence. And today, as our special guest, we have Matt Weiner. Matt is the Senior Director at Rheem Manufacturing. She's the Senior Director of L&D at Rheem Manufacturing. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks so much, Lori. So glad to be here with you today.
Awesome. So I'm sure everyone is curious. So what does it look like in the day in the life of Matt? Tell us a little bit more about what you do at Rheem.
Absolutely. So, the way I like to describe my role is I'm responsible for the talent and learning team at Rheem. And we are a global function that operates as a center of excellence. So, we're a small but mighty team responsible for all things talent from the time of hire through the time of retire. So, talent acquisition is separate from what we do in talent and learning. But once an individual is on board with Rheem, we lead them through onboarding. We do learning and leadership development, performance management, talent review, succession planning, all things engagement, culture, learning management system administration. So I always like to say if it involves people, we're going to poke our nose into it. And every day is a little bit different. Rheem is a manufacturer of water heating, air conditioning, pool boilers, heat pumps, all things that move heat, water, cold, and air. And so we have both production employees who are responsible for producing those goods, as well as salaried employees who do all of the services like finance, product management, engineering, sales. And our team supports all of them. We do it through great partnerships with our HR partners in our different locations, our plant locations, regional, global locations, and we do it directly with our different business leaders based on requests. So any day, one of our talent team might be doing consulting for an individual development plan for a new hire. They might be doing consulting on instructional design for a compliance project, or to look at what do we do with our leaders around next term? How do we apply our competencies? And what do we do around mission, vision, values? So it's a lot of different things, and it's really fun.
Wow, I bet. And I know that the leadership development stuff has been near and dear to your heart, at least most recently.
hmm Yeah. So the learning and leadership development part has been near to my heart, oh gosh, forever. And I'm not going to say how many years I have been in this field, but we could say I'm very seasoned. As far as learning and leadership development at Rheem, we came back from the pandemic really needing to reinvigorate talent and learning for all of Rheem's employees, I think, like many. And so we started from the place of saying, well, if we're going to do learning, leadership development, we really need to look at the why and the what. What is going to be the most impact, and how are we going to start really from the building back the supports and the foundations? And so we started with building and refreshing a competency model and just saying, what are those leadership competencies that individuals need at every level? And so we identified about 13 individual competencies that can be different behaviorally at 4 different levels through the organization. So we look at what's it look like when you're leading yourself? What's it look like when you're starting to lead a team as a new manager? What does it look like as you're leading a team of teams, right? Managers of managers. And what does it look like at the overall organizational level? And from there, started to dive into, okay, so what are the behaviors that we'll see? How does this show up? And how do we help people learn around these behaviors? So we started taking this competency model and really building all things around it and embedding it into our talent processes. And so we said, well, if we're going to have leadership programs, what are the most important competencies that we need for these programs? And which programs do we need first, second, third? We need them all. So what are we going to do first, and what will have the most impact? And so we really concentrated first on manager essentials and said, we need to arm our new managers or managers who are coming into Rheem with the foundational skills, kind of the nitty gritty of what it takes to be a manager. So things like setting goals, doing performance evaluation, giving feedback, having one on one conversations, having difficult conversations, and really driving that in. And what we focused on was how do we do it across the organization in a way that's scalable, right? As we're looking at 3 years worth of managers who hadn't had training in a while since kind of the pandemic. And how do we do it in a way that brings people from different departments, functions, businesses within Rheem across to really see their peers and be able to network as well? And so we built a virtual program that's cohort based. It goes about 2 months because we wanted to make sure that not only were we providing information about these new skills, but we were really providing opportunities to practice during the sessions and then practice on the job. And then another big piece of that was saying, well, if we're having our new managers practice on the job, we need to have their managers really armed to support them and guide all of this practice and application. And so we developed what we call oh gosh, the term is losing it. The maximizing learning application module, right, is for the managers of these session participants, where we really dug into, well, what's your role as a participant manager? And what impact are you going to have? And what are our expectations of you as leaders for the organization? Two reasons for that. One, we wanted them to be guiding their participants through. And two, we wanted to keep reiterating in this culture that we want for Rheem, we want to make sure that people managers and leaders see themselves as leaders of people and not just process, particularly as most of us are working managers. So, we don't have anyone who is just a supervisor of people without also supervising work functions. So, Manager Essentials, really big program. We're now in cohort 5, about to launch cohort 6. And we also translated the program into Spanish. So that's exciting so that we can do it for our Mexico and Latin America employees. And we're starting to work with our HR partners in Europe to figure out a way to deliver a similar program in Dutch and German for our companies in the Netherlands and Germany. So we're really going global with that program. So we have our manager essentials kind of as part of our leadership journey. The next piece that we looked at from a leadership component was that layer that's kind of middle manager. They are starting to lead managers of managers. And we looked at that and said, this is really a layer that's having huge impact. How are we going to arm these people? What do we need to make sure they understand and know and can do in terms of empowering their teams and empowering their leaders? Because it's really all about, executing through others at this layer. And so we worked with a vendor partner to develop another program that was more than just, hey, come in for a fabulous, 2 days of learning. Rather, it's almost a 5-month program that involves individual learning. It involves coaching. It involves pod learning with small groups of people. It involves 2 different simulations, one on a business sim, one as a leadership simulation, and lots of networking in person and virtually. And we've had huge response to this program. It's been going on now for a year and a half. We're in the midst of our cohort 3. We're starting to amp up for cohort 4, and we're looking at potentially bringing this to another global region sometime in early 26. So that's very exciting. And again, it's based on those competencies that were the foundation and support for, okay, what do we really want to make sure we're doing from a behavioral standpoint? Um, in terms of leadership development, again, that's near and dear to my heart. So we are looking at what's the next step on this leadership journey. And likely we're going to be focusing on manager as leader. So we've got manager essentials, we've got those mid-level leaders. We're coming back and saying, okay, you've been a manager for a while. Now you need to look at what you're doing with a different mindset, and we'll formulate a program for that. And in between all of that, we're really also developing what we're calling essential skills. So it's not necessarily tied to someone's role in the organization, but it's tied to those competencies to say, hey, project management is something that I really need. What's available in that arena? Or I would like to be better in terms of communication. What are some of the programs that are available to me? Or short courses, what online learning. So we're also looking at curating a lot of our learning through our learning management system, through our learning content, and curating it around competencies. Again, so people can look at, say, what's it going to take for me to excel at this level? And what's it going to take for me to get to the next layer that I want to for growth?
That sounds amazing. And it truly is incredible how much you have been able to get done in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I've been really lucky to have, great internal partners, great teams, and really the difference has been the attention and support from leadership for, this is really important to us. We need to make sure that we have programs for our leaders. So it's been a fabulous, exciting ride.
So tell us a little bit about what first attracted you to the L&D field.
So I came into the L&D field as a subject matter expert to provide audit training. And so I was one of those people who they said, hey, would you come and, just facilitate a little bit of a class and, help spread your skills around, and we'll just have you come and do a few sessions. And I thought, oh, well, this sounds really exciting. I love talking about what I do. And so I came in, and Lori, this is so embarrassing. The feedback I got on my first class was, Matt sounds like a wooden mannequin. So I learned from there, and just, started to really love the idea of helping people do better with whatever skill they were looking at. And so from being a subject matter expert, I was invited to take a rotation to do audit training and lead that function. So I then was pulling the subject matter experts in to do that audit training. And that also led to working with some partners to develop new training, fell in love with actually creating learning and developing case studies, sort of made a name for myself about how can we, give you a little bit of information and you make that into a scenario and a case study to take all the way through the class. And, from there just sort of took off in the L&D field, looking for different ways to bring learning to adult learners and figure out, well, what's going to really make it stick? And that has really been part of the journey all along, sort of looking at how do I help, individuals and managers and people leaders get as effective as possible? How do we make it stick? And now the challenge is really how do we continue to scale it and to continue to grow in this ever changing world that we have?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always find that question fascinating. Everyone has a different answer, and all of them are really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
It's amazing how many people in the L&D field, don't get into it. Oh, well, I went to school for L&D and, I knew I was going to do that forever. It's usually, well, this happened and I was asked to do that. And, next thing you know, it's been a number of years.
yeah, that's wonderful. So, what thinking about, you've been in the field for a long time, thinking about the most impactful changes that have occurred in the last few years to our field, what have those been in your mind?
So I'll get to AI in a minute and all of the impact of that in the last few years. I think that becomes some of the obvious answers. But I also think if we go back a little bit further and look at what happened post pandemic, there is such a need that people had and still have for being relational and really figuring out how to reconnect. And I believe that has impacted the field in looking at how do we use technology? How do we take so much of what we learned about using platforms like Zoom, like Teams to deliver, but then tie it in with and how do we make sure that we're still connecting people so that we get that um, ability to network. We get that personal feeling. We feel like we're developing relationships. And that's a lot of what we are trying to do, as we look at cohorted leadership programs or as we look at peer to peer learning and as we continue to evolve that. So that's a big piece. I think, in the last few years, there's been a lot of discussion about skilling, whether it's upskilling or reskilling, and thinking about well, what does that mean as we look at different models that we use, different areas that we concentrate on, continuing to really try to evaluate, well, what are the skills that we're going to need, from a leadership standpoint that are going to continue to be critically important? And what do we need to keep? And what do we need to shift and change? And that's something, that we've been concentrating on for a while. And then, the AI enabled tools that has just, brought huge changes to the L&D field. And I think in a really good way if we look at it and say, gosh, this has really enabled us to do some things more quickly, to really scale the things that we're doing and to deliver learning in all sorts of different ways, whether it's coaching or online learning in different platforms or just knowledge sharing in different ways. And the question people often ask is, well, do you think, that with AI, we're going to get rid of the learning and development professionals? And I would say absolutely not. We still need people to consult. We still need to be able to say, well, is this really a learning problem? And then how do we solve for what the root cause of some of these learning issues are, training issues, skill issues? It still needs that. And it still needs someone to think creatively. So AI is fabulous, but for us, it relies on the prompts, it relies on the person being able to say, this is what we need. And we still need those people, to make the connections and bring people along.
That's a wonderful response to the AI question. And I agree with you completely. And maybe that launches us into the next question. So, looking out into the next 5 to 10 years in our field, where are we headed as an L&D professional?
I think we're continuing to head, in that arena of AI enabled tools for scalability and for in more individualized and differentiated learning. We've been talking about that for a while. We look at different learning experience platforms and say, well, now you can choose your learning, just like you would choose something from Amazon. You can see different suggestions and recommendations. I think that is going to continue but the ability to, at least I hope this continues, the ability to bring learning to where people are in different ways, whether it's some sort of mobile tool or some other enabled tool, to be able to really look at it from this place of how does whatever the technology will be, smarter minds than mine are thinking about it. But, it doesn't have to be, okay, I need to take, 3 days out of somewhere to just get learning. It's part of, what we will be doing. And I think there will be more and more of that hybrid, flexible learning coming on board.
Mhm. It's gonna be interesting. I feel like the pace of change continues to increase faster and faster, more and more.
That is so true. If we look at even what we were exploring in my team a year ago, it's changed so much. We're doing a lot of looking at how do we use AI for coaching? How do we use it to continue application of the things that people are learning in programs? How do we set up scenarios that may change based on what your need is versus what my need is. And we couldn't have done that even 6 months ago. So we're seeing all sorts of companies popping up, all sorts of use cases, a lot of excitement and also anxiety, right? This is change coming. What's going to happen? What will the world look like tomorrow?
Yes, and thank you for calling that out because I am seeing and feeling a lot of that. Um, so if we had and all of this costs money, right? So if we have an unlimited budget, right, we can do anything that we want. Where is it that you think we should be spending our focus? Where would you spend your focus?
Um, Two places. One would be those AI enabled tools to really look at how do we continue to use them to scale and differentiate. The other arena would be looking at, where are my learning and development consultants, right? How do I get more people who are working with the employees and their leaders to really focus on what's going to make the difference? Because we can have great tools, but if we don't really know what we're solving for, and really getting in there with people to understand the use cases and business outcomes. It's great training, right? The cookies were fabulous, but it's not having impact for the business. And I think regardless of how much money might or might not be available, we need to continue to look at what has impact for the business and what has impact for the individuals.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. As we think about where you go for industry news in our field, where are some of the places other folks can learn even more about these things that you're sharing with us?
One of the places that I go is I'm a member of different leadership development forums. There's one called the Leadership Development Community of Practice. It's formulated by LeadX, but it doesn't have anything to do with the LeadX people other than being hosted by it. And usually they have an author talk about a new book in the in the environment, and they also talk about a case study of what has someone done. So it's actually practitioner information. A lot of times you go to a webinar or something and you hear these great ideas, and you think, well, how will I possibly do that in my organization, right? What will it look like? So that one is all about that. How do you do it? I also look at ATD and SHRM just to see what's out there. Training Pros has had some wonderful get togethers and roundtables to look at things. In the talent field, I use the Human Resource Leader Forum to be able to do that. So I use a lot of different sources. I'm also on different subscriptions like HR Brew is a digital, like everyday mail subscription. It's put out by Forbes that just kind of shoots out what's going on in the HR world. And there's often little things that are very learning and development oriented. And then I also have a subscription to McKinsey's newsletter on talent and learning. And, again, I don't read it all every day because, gosh, who has all of the time for that? But I look at all of the headlines and see, oh, wait a minute, here's something on upskilling. I'm going to dive into that. Oh, I'm saving this one. This is about hybrid learning. Oh, this is about AI coaching. I'm saving this one. So lots of different places to go to learn new things.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing all that. Some new things too that I haven't heard before. So thank you. And you mentioned books. So that's my next question. What is the one book that folks that are new to our field, one or two, new to
Okay.
our field must
You.
read?
Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, I can in no way say one book. But for people new to the field, there was a book that was written recently. And actually, this one it's a 2024 book that was um, delivered at the Leadership Community of Practice. It's called The Facilitation Advantage, and it's by Kat Coppett and Therese Miklot. So it's a new book, and it is great for new individuals in the field because it's not talking just about facilitation. It's also talking about driving impact building relationships and looking for ways to influence. And so it really looks into the mindset of a learning consultant, facilitator. How do I engage all of the people that I'm with? And what can I do in specific steps to make these things even more powerful? So that one is a good one. And then I think Daniel Pink's book Drive from, oh gosh, it's going back a ways, but it is one of the seminal books that I refer people to for really looking at human motivation and thinking about how are we engaging people in learning in a way that's really going to call to them. And are we doing it in a way that's going to, again, have that impact individually?
Wow, I'm definitely gonna have to check that one out. I haven't heard of that one before, and it's called Drive by
Drive
Daniel
by
Pink.
Daniel Pink.
Okay, okay. I love that question. There's so many, and there really are so many great books that maybe weren't even written for folks in our field that a lot of insight. Thank you for sharing that.
And, when people ask what's on your bookshelf, I'm like, well, what's on my bookshelf and what have I read lately? Because it's falling over.
Yes, yes. Um, Constant learning. You have to have a love for learning or you wouldn't be in this field.
Well, exactly.
Okay.
Love learning.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest today on our Learning Leader Spotlight.
Oh, you are so welcome. It was my pleasure, Lori. Thank you.
And as a gesture, in return for participating today and being our guest, we would like to plant 5 trees in your name. So, tra
Thank you so
you're
much.
welcome, you're welcome. Training Pros as a company is committed to reforestation. And so far, we have planted over 3,500 trees across the globe. And we're happy to say that 5 of those trees are going to be added to that number, and they'll be in your name.
Yay. Thank you. That's fabulous.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for being here today. And thank you to all of our listeners for attending this session, listening to us, and referring us to others. This is the end of this episode for Learning Leader Spotlight. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.